The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway was the only sound as I stood in my parents' living room, clutching the ultrasound photo I had brought to show them. The baby's tiny silhouette stared back at me, 5 months old, just big enough to show the curve of her spine, the outline of her little fists. My hands trembled as I offered it to my mother. She didn't take it. Instead, she looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. My father sat stiffly on the edge of his armchair, avoiding my eyes, the muscles in his jaw twitching. "I'm pregnant," I had said only a minute before, trying to smile through the storm of fear rising in my chest. "It's a girl." No one smiled back. "You're not even married," my mother said, as if the words tasted bitter. "Do you realize what kind of shame this brings to our family? I'm engaged," I whispered, swallowing hard. "Ethan's away right now, but we're engaged is not married." Her voice was ice, and being 5 months pregnant is not moral, no matter what excuse you've come up with. I took a small step forward. "Mom, I thought you'd be happy for me. I'm still me. I'm still your daughter." Her eyes narrowed. "Not anymore." Those 3 words hit harder than any slap ever could. I stood there, stunned, as my father rose from his seat. "We warned you," he said, his voice strained. "We raised you better than this. You chose this path. Now you can live with the consequences." I blinked rapidly, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What are you saying? You need to leave," my mother said, turning away. "Tonight." Panic bloomed in my chest. "But where would I even? I don't have." "There's a suitcase by the door," my father interrupted. "We packed what you'll need. We're done." I stared at them, unable to move. My heart broke so loudly, I swore the room could hear it. My baby kicked for the first time just then, a tiny flutter against my belly. She was alive inside me. She was listening. They couldn't even look me in the eye. I turned slowly, walked to the door, and saw the suitcase. A cheap one from the attic with the wheels half broken and my name written in faded Sharpie on the tag. My entire life reduced to one bag, and a silence I would never forget. I opened the door. The night air hit me like a slap. "Cold, alone, rejected, goodbye," I whispered, but no one answered. I stepped out into the night. 5 months pregnant, 24 years old, and utterly unwanted by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But as I walked down the sidewalk under flickering streetlights, one hand on my belly, I promised her, my daughter, that this would not be the end of us. This would be the beginning. The first night outside felt longer than my entire life before it. I found myself sitting on a hard bench at the edge of a park, my suitcase beside me, and my coat pulled tight over my growing belly. The fall air bit through the fabric. It smelled like dying leaves and distant rain. No one tells you how loud the night gets when you're alone. Every shuffle of leaves, every car passing by, every creak of branches sounded like a threat. I kept one hand protectively over my belly, whispering softly to calm both of us. "I'm here, baby," I said. "We're gonna be okay." I didn't believe myself. By midnight, I gave up on pretending I was strong. I searched on my phone for nearby shelters, my fingers shaking as I dialed the first number. They had one bed left, for a single woman in crisis. That was me now. A crisis, not a daughter, not a fiancé, just a girl with a baby and nowhere to go. The shelter was downtown. 2 bus transfers, and a long walk through neighborhoods I'd never dared visit before. I could feel eyes on me, see the judgment in strangers' glances. A few men muttered things I didn't understand and didn't want to. When I finally reached the building, my feet were blistered and my soul was frayed. The woman at the desk had kind eyes. She gave me a key and a voucher for a warm meal. I tried to thank her, but my voice cracked. That first night in the shelter, I cried myself to sleep on a thin mattress in a shared room with 3 other women. One snored loudly, one muttered in her sleep, and one just stared at the ceiling in silence. We were all strangers, but we had one thing in common. We had been discarded. The next few weeks were a blur of survival. I tried to find work, but who hires a visibly pregnant woman with no address? I applied everywhere. Diners, small shops, even a laundry service. They smiled politely, told me they'd keep my resume on file. I used what little money I had for food. I skipped meals so my daughter wouldn't have to. Prenatal vitamins were a luxury I could no longer afford. Still, I kept all my doctor appointments even if it meant walking 2 hours to get there. Every night, I lay on that thin mattress and talked to my baby. I told her about all the things I'd give her one day. A room with sunshine, bedtime stories, birthday cakes with pink candles. A home, a real family. There were days I wanted to give up. I thought about calling my parents, begging them to reconsider. But pride and pain stopped me. They didn't deserve her or me, and Ethan. I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened. His family was so powerful, so wealthy. What would they think of me now? A charity case? A scandal? I wanted him to be proud of me when he came back. Still, every time I looked at my phone and saw no messages from him, a small ache opened up inside me. He said he'd be gone for 2 weeks. It had been almost 4. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he cared. But doubt is a slow poison, and I was drinking it, drop by drop. One afternoon, while sitting in the waiting room at the free clinic, flipping through a month-old magazine, I heard the door burst open behind me. "Where is she?" a familiar voice demanded. I turned, and there he was, Ethan. His hair was messy, his jacket soaked from rain, his eyes frantic until they found mine. I stood slowly, unable to believe it. "Ethan," I whispered. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled me into his arms. I let out a sob so deep it shook my whole body. "I couldn't reach you," he said, holding my face in his hands. "Your phone kept going to voicemail. What the hell happened? Why didn't you tell me?" And then it all poured out: the shelter, the rejection, the humiliation. The nights spent alone talking to the baby, so I wouldn't feel like I was disappearing. His face darkened as he listened. "They threw you out," he whispered, eyes blazing. "Your own parents." I nodded, biting back another sob. He stepped back, jaw clenched, and looked at me like I was the most fragile and precious thing in the world. "Get your things," he said. "You're not spending another night like this. I'm taking you home." I stared at him. "But your family will love you," he said fiercely. "Because I love you. And no one treats the mother of my child like this." For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Hope. The car was silent as we drove through the city and up into the hills where the trees thickened and the buildings grew larger and colder. My suitcase sat awkwardly between us in the back seat of Ethan's private SUV, a brutal reminder of where I'd just come from. I clutched it like a life raft, heart pounding harder with every passing mansion. "I shouldn't be here," I murmured. "They'll hate me." Ethan reached for my hand. "No, they won't." I didn't believe him, not fully. His family wasn't just rich. They were Hawthorne rich. Private island, generational wealth, Forbes. Cover kind of rich. The kind of family that had security at the gates and last names engraved in marble. I had imagined this moment before, back when we first started dating, back when things were light and perfect. I imagined meeting his mother in a tasteful dress, not this borrowed coat with its frayed cuffs and a zipper that didn't close over my belly anymore. The gates swung open like the jaws of a secret world, and there it was, the Hawthorne estate. It didn't look like a house. It looked like a palace dressed as a home. Perfect gardens, ivy, wrapped pillars, windows glowing like lanterns. I wanted to disappear into the leather seats and never come out. The front doors opened before we even reached them. A woman stepped out barefoot, her robe draping effortlessly around her like something out of a magazine. Cassandra Hawthorne, Ethan's mother, the elegant, fearsome woman I had Googled more times than I could admit. And yet, the moment her eyes met mine, her whole expression shifted. She didn't look furious or scandalized. She looked heartbroken. "Is this her?" she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Mom, this is." Before he could finish, she was already walking toward me. To my shock, she didn't hesitate. She didn't look me up and down or scowl at my wrinkled clothes. She hugged me. Full arms around me, her hand gently cupping the back of my head like I might break. "My God," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You poor, sweet girl." And just like that, the dam inside me burst again. I cried, right there on the steps of a mansion I didn't feel worthy of entering. She just held me tighter. Inside, it felt like stepping into another planet. Everything gleamed. The floor was so polished I could see the reflection of my swollen feet in it. Staff members moved discreetly in the background, but no one looked at me like I didn't belong. They offered me water, warm food, a robe. Someone had already started preparing a room, no, a suite, for me. A private nurse arrived before dinner, asking gentle questions about my health and history. She listened, she didn't judge. Cassandra sat beside me while I ate slowly, holding my shaking hands when I told her about the shelter, about my parents, about how scared I'd been. "I want you to understand something," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You are not a charity case. You are family, and no one will ever throw you out again." Later that night, Ethan's father, Richard, arrived home. I'd imagined him as cold and distant, some tycoon who'd see me as a threat to the family name. Instead, he sat across from me, silent for a long moment, and then asked, "Do you play piano?" I blinked a little. "In high school." He smiled. "Good. The one in the library's been lonely. I expect to hear music again." It was so absurdly kind, so gentle, I almost laughed. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. Over the next few weeks, I began to heal. A nutritionist helped me eat properly again. A therapist helped me work through the trauma I hadn't even realized I'd buried. Cassandra and I started planning the nursery. She insisted on painting the walls herself. I never got to do this with Ethan. She said with a shy smile, one evening as we stood surrounded by color swatches and little elephant decals, "I was always too busy. I want to do it right this time." Even Ethan's sister, Ivy, who I had been certain would hate me, started showing up with baby clothes and gossip magazines, pretending not to cry when she felt the baby kick for the first time. In the Hawthorne home, I was seen, not as a burden or a shame, but as something precious, something loved. And when the time finally came, when Aurora entered the world with a cry that shattered every fear I'd been holding on to, she was met with applause, laughter, champagne toasts, and tearful kisses from a family that had already claimed her long before she took her first breath. I held her in my arms, surrounded by beauty, by safety, by love, and I thought of the day I had stood on that porch with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. How strange that I had lost everything only to find something better. Something real. The invitation list for the Hawthorne Foundation's charity gala was tight, just under 200 of the wealthiest, most influential names in the state. Ethan had put me in charge of the event's theme. I chose new beginnings. No one batted an eye. I walked through the grand ballroom in a gown that shimmered like dusk. Aurora nestled against my shoulder in a silk wrap. She was 8 months old now, healthy, curious, and loved beyond measure. Every guest stopped to smile at her. Cameras clicked softly in the corners. A New York Times columnist whispered that the young Miss Hawthorne was society's newest darling. My parents had no invitation. And yet, as if fate itself wanted to test me, they arrived. It was the security guard's hesitant voice in my earpiece that gave them away. "Ma'am," he said, "there's a couple at the gate, Thomas and Helen Brooks. They say they're your parents." I froze. I hadn't heard those names in nearly a year. My hands trembled just slightly as I adjusted Aurora's blanket. "Do they know you've contacted me?" "No, ma'am. They just said they came to make peace." "Make peace?" The same people who kicked me out like garbage when I needed them most. The same parents who hadn't called, hadn't written, hadn't even asked if their granddaughter had survived the winter. I took a deep breath. I looked at my daughter's tiny, sleeping face. Then I said calmly, "Let them in." The staff parted like water as I walked through the ballroom to the front entrance, every step measured, every breath steady. Guests turned their heads, whispers following me, but I didn't care. I wasn't that frightened, discarded girl anymore. I was Aurora's mother. I was a Hawthorne now, in name and in strength. The doors opened and there they stood. My father looked older somehow. His face thinner, shoulders hunched, as if life had finally started to weigh on him, the way it had weighed on me for years. My mother still wore her pearls, but they looked dull against her pallid skin. "Amelia," she said, her voice cracking. "You look beautiful." I tilted my head slightly. "I know." My father cleared his throat. "We just wanted to see the baby." I stepped aside slightly so they could see her, still sleeping against my chest. My mother took a step forward, eyes glistening. "She's Weakness," she whispered. "She looks like you did as a baby." "No," I said softly but firmly. "She's not yours. She never was." My father's face tensed. "Look, we were wrong. We were overwhelmed, scared. It doesn't matter now, right? We're still family." The word stung. "Family," I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Where was family when I was sleeping in a shelter, pregnant and terrified? When I was turned away from job after job because of the bump you refused to even acknowledge? Neither of them spoke. "I begged you," I continued, the emotion rising despite myself. "I called, I left voicemails, I asked you for help, and you threw me away." Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but I didn't soften. "Not this time, my daughter," I said, stroking Aurora's cheek gently. "We'll never know what it feels like to be unwanted. She will never beg for love. She is surrounded by people who would burn down the world to protect her." I looked them both in the eye, and none of them share her blood. My father opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I don't need anything from you, not your approval, not your guilt, not your regrets, a quiet pause. But since you came all this way, let me give you something." They looked up hopefully, closure. And with that, I turned and walked back inside toward my life, my family, my future. Aurora stirred slightly, her tiny fingers brushing my collarbone. "You're safe now," I whispered, "and I'll never let you forget it." The music swelled behind us as the ballroom doors closed. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt whole.